Welcome back to Suiting Up Varsity Want to Start a Fight. In fact, it's a very special episode of Want to Start a Fight because we're going to fight about something different. Instead of, like usual, picking out one high school and trying to start a fight about who the greatest athlete of all time was, we're going to fight about the most interesting uniforms and uniform patterns in the history of Nebraska high school sports. Now, why? Because this video is a salute to my favorite blog, my favorite website, one of my favorite writers in the world, uniwatch.com, and Paul Lukas. As Paul is this weekend stepping away from a 25-year career in writing about the journalism of sports aesthetics, a field he basically created. As a kid, I loved football helmets and sports uniforms, and the only artistic thing I ever did in my life was drawing things like that. To stumble across UniWatch over 2 decades ago was like coming home. And I wish I could have hit up one of the nationwide stops on Paul's farewell tour, but I had to graduate a kid from college, so this is the next best I can do. And so I went looking through my files of photos from Suiting Up Varsity, and I picked out 12, I think, of the most interesting uniform stories, patterns, whatchamacallit, in Nebraska high school sports history, kind of taking the confluence of my two passions here. All right. I've got a dozen. They're unranked. I'm not going 1 through 12. I'm calling them 1 through 12, but I don't know which one's the greatest. I guess that's what we'll fight about. All right. Without further ado, a quick thanks to Paul out there and wishing you a great next chapter. But here's our number 1 Nebraska Prep Sports uniform topic. For our number 1, I'm going to go with my specific uniform for one school at one time that I like the best, and that is the Lincoln Northeast football uniforms of the early 1960s. I think I'm drawn to them, number 1, because of the simplicity. Northeast is always stuck with the black and white. Oh, yeah, maybe a little silver here and there, but black and white school colors. And I love the early 60s because of the simple helmet, the straight up and down white rocket on a black helmet. As you can see here on my Fred Kale statue that I paid a little too much for. Fred Kale was kind of famous for these statues, but very few high schools had one. They were usually issued by banks. They're piggy banks. I love this one because it shows my favorite Northeast uniform, but there's more. A couple years after this statuette, Northeast tweaked the uniform, and they took the simple and made it very innovative. They wore pants that had black fronts and white backs. They were a little bit of an optical illusion. You know, when you're wearing your home whites for Northeast at that time, if you saw a player from the front, it looked like they were wearing white over black. If you saw them from the back, it looked like they were wearing all white. And then on the road blacks, from the front, it looked like they were going Darth Vader, all black. But you got around to the back of that player, and it looked very traditional, black over white. I love the Lincoln Northeast early 60s football uniforms. Okay, number 2 on our hit parade is my favorite uniform tradition in the history of Nebraska high school sports. For that, I'm going to football too, but I'm headed up Interstate 80 to Omaha Creighton Prep. Now, a lot of people may be thinking, oh, the great CP helmet logo, and that is great. But really, that's not what says Prep when you see a football helmet. What says Prep is the 3 stripes. They've been wearing the 3 stripes way before they invented the CP. 1953 at least that helmet goes back to. And Prep continued to wear it into the 60s when they played great games at Rosenblatt Stadium, like the state title game against Central and many others under the lights of that College World Series stadium. Into the 70s when they did create the CP logo to go with the 3 stripes. Into the 80s when Prep became the dominant dynasty of Nebraska high school sports, and on into the 90s and the 2000s, games at Memorial Stadium, and now even in the modern era where they experiment with uniforms. And they've always experimented a little with uniforms, but lately even different colors of blue, and as long as the 3 stripes are there, it looks like Prep. And nothing proves that more than when you break the rule. Okay. And they've broken it a couple ways. Number 1, they broke it with white helmet shells lately. 3 stripes, still looks like prep. They also broke it one night when they decided to look like Oregon. Not 3 stripes, that doesn't look like prep. My number 2 is the Creighton Prep tradition of the 3 stripes on the football helmet. Okay, back for number 3. Really close to being a tradition, but this is even more specific than Prep's 3 stripes. And we're doing football again. I'm going to the Minden Whippets and how they just owned a typeface for 2 decades. Okay? I've never seen a color picture, so I've never seen this in purple. I've only seen it in black and white, but I tell you, when I see the typeface, I know that's the Minden Whippets. Sorry about the purple content, Paul. But the Whippets owned this from 1966 through at least 1985, where every football uniform they ordered had these same numbers, these same sans serif, mostly. There's a couple little serifs on a couple of the numbers, fonts. And so my number 3 is the Minden Whippets just simply owning this font. Nobody else dared wear it because it was Minden. Number 4 on our countdown goes to one uniform. A uniform, a flash in the pan, but so important. And that's the Omaha West Side soccer uniforms in 1975. Now, they wore some variations of these for several years. Beautiful. Red and white stripes over the black shorts. You can see here in this not great photo that it was an amazing look. And you know, coolness had to keep soccer going in Nebraska at that time. It took 20 years from the birth of soccer as a club sport in the late 60s, maybe about 68 at just a couple of schools, through 2 decades where it was mainly isolated in Omaha, all the way until becoming a full-fledged varsity state official sport in the late 80s. And this West Side look was a key to keeping things going. Of course, West Side was one of the powerful teams too. So the West Side uni is my number 4. For number 5, I've got kind of a double threat here. I've got my favorite style of uniforms combined with my favorite current uniform controversy in the state of Nebraska that absolutely no one else is paying attention to me. This is a controversy only in my head. I can't seem to get anybody else to even pay attention to it. And that is how awesome basketball jerseys can be when the front number is offset. You get a little diagonal to the name on the front, like these beauties from 1968 and the Centura Centurions, maybe the longest word I've ever seen scripted diagonally on a uniform. Here's Hyannis doing it in 1971. Here's 1971 Fairbury and 1974 Holdridge going hard angle. I love those. 1977 Tri-County also shows you don't have to go script here to make those look good. Late 70s Lincoln Southeast, the gold uniforms, the script, the offset numbers, love that. I wore these uniforms at Hastings in the 80s. Now, what's the controversy? Well, these are illegal now. Your number has to be centered in the front. That's the National Federation rules. The Nebraska High School Athletic Association reminds coaches of this every year. And yet Omaha West Side for the last 2 years in postseason has been wearing these beauties. I love these. They should be legal. I don't think they are. No one seems to pay attention to that. No one seems to have ever said a word to West Side about it. So I don't know. I'd kind of like the NSAA to come out and just say, hey, West Side wears those because we're cool with it. The national rules, we're okay. We can bend them. This is Nebraska. We want cool uniforms. Coaches, go buy more of these. That's my number 5. Okay, number 6 and number 7 are also basketball uniform stories, and they really go together, okay? The first is the way things ought to be. And of course, the way things ought to be is how they were when you were first a fan. And when I was a fan in high school basketball, heck, in college basketball, you had 2 numbers. At home, you wore an even number. On the road, you wore an odd. When I was a senior in high school, I wore 40 at home, 41 on the road. Okay? That's just the way it ought to be, because that's the way it was when I was growing up. But what I've found is, and here's a great example. We can see Grant. This is Grant, 1968. Very seldom do we have 2 team pictures from a team wearing their homes and roads. And you can see here the white set has evens and the red set has odds. Okay. What I've learned, though, in looking at basketball numbers, because, guys, you know what I'm afraid of. Pretty soon they're going to eliminate the rule where you can only use digits up to 5 in high school. And it's just going to be a free-for-all, okay? It's going to be horrible. Kids are going to be wearing 8. I don't want to see a high school kid wearing 8, but it's going to happen. There was just such an elegance about the even and odd rule. No one on the floor ever had the same number. Just like the 5 digits up to 5, it was for referee simplicity. Okay, yeah, sure, it caused some coaches problems in scorebooks, but, everybody had 2 numbers and they were almost always a pair, okay? I remember Randy Cipriano of Kearney State. He used to wear 11 when he came to Hastings, and I remember going over to Kearney to watch the game. He's wearing number 4. That was perfect for Cipriano, man. A guy didn't follow the rules. I could just hate Kearney State more, but I digress. All right. That's not the way it's always been. At first, there were no basketball numbers at all. In fact, in the early days of the state tournament, in order to differentiate players, they had pin-on pieces of paper, kind of like you're used to seeing in a marathon. And they pinned them on. And every kid in the state tournament, like the big 1926 tournament with 300 and some teams in it, every kid had a different number. So there were 3-digit numbers, okay? I'd love to get a hold of one of those pieces of paper. Then they started to have numbers on the back. Okay. And mainly they went with small numbers, what I would call the Olympic numbers. When the United States goes to the Olympics, everybody wears 0 through 21. Okay. Baseball numbers, if you will, the way I think baseball teams ought to be numbered, because that's how they did it when I was a kid. Then they moved on a little bit and they went to series of numbers. And so you'd see a team that the whole team, the 12 guys, would be numbered like 37 through 48. And that would be their numbers. They'd have a series of them. And you kind of imagine when they bought the next uni set that they would just buy the next series of numbers. But then came my favorite, and this is my number 7. Evens and odds were my number 6. My number 7 is the double doubles. Teams where everybody was wearing a double. So there was 11, 22, 33, 44, 55, 66, 77, 88, 99, and 00 if you needed a 10th kid. Okay. You could always see the oddballs who weren't going to get a play very much because they'd have the 11th and 12th numbers maybe, and they'd have to wear 12 and 14. How embarrassing. You wanted a double number. But one thing I've learned is mainly these were just fads, and that was a beautiful fad. And, the fad of the kids want to wear low numbers again. I noticed that's starting to go away. I'm starting to see some 40s and 50s again. Please, just don't change the rule and let them wear 17. Ugh. Middle school teams I'll see sometimes wearing those, and it hurts. All right, that's number 7. Okay, number 8 on our hit parade is my favorite oddball helmets. Okay, just kind of one and dones or one guy and done helmets. Okay, I got a few that come to the top of my mind. 1980 Omaha Benson wearing the Angry Bunny. The Omaha Benson's Mighty Bunnies, one of the greatest nicknames in the nation. And in 1980, I think is the only time they wore Angry Bunny on their skulls. And I love that logo. I love that cartoon. A great look. 1974, Winnebago wore like a white stripe, an arrow, a wing across their helmet with their numbers in it and put the W in front. I love it when people go a little bit different. Then in 1972, this is a one-man thing. Number 88 from McCool Junction, whoever he was the Crazy Eights. And he wanted you to know that. He put Crazy 8 on his helmet. Okay, and then another one-man band operation. And this, I think, is braver than Crazy Eights. 1971, Lincoln Pius X. Now, I don't know. Maybe Pius was a real beatnik operation in 1971, but I don't think so. I see it as probably a pretty conservative place. And this dude, this defensive tackle, he's got a peace sign right on the front of that yellow dome for Pius. I love it. Then my final one, my favorite one, my white whale. I've been looking for this for a long time. 1976, Lincoln East, who's always worn the same helmet. Since 1967, white helmet, blue Spartan. That's it. Every year. Okay, maybe a light blue stripe added. Same helmet. In 1976, Coach Lee Zinnick and the Spartans went with a bicentennial logo on one side of the helmet and changed one of their blue stripes to red. Now, I know what you're saying. They're copying the Dallas Cowboys. But East played early enough in the year. And how quick could you order that logo? I just don't think so. I think Lee Zinnick came up with the idea before or at the same time as Gil Brandt and Tom Landry did. The bicentennial Lincoln East helmet, my white whale. If anybody's got a color picture of it, I'd love to see it. My favorite oddball helmet. That's number 8. Number 9 on our countdown is the All-State picture in full uniform. I love it, especially when they bring all the kids together, but just really, you got to see them in their full uniform. And they do it most years in the papers here in Nebraska. Here's some great examples. Way back to 1941 football, 1960 football, and yes, that's Gale Sayers. 1978 basketball, 2006 football. Here you see they're not in full uniform, just not as satisfying. I got to tell you, when I was a kid growing up, I had those pictures. I had them taped to my wall because that was my goal. I wanted to be on that team. Oh, got to stop for a minute and explain to the children. Newspapers used to come on paper. Oh, okay. And I didn't make it. But if I had, and it had been one of those years where they just gathered the All-Staters together and had them dressed like in the stuff they wore to the Y-Teen formal, I'm not sure I'd have gone to the picture. All-Staters ought to be in full uniform. Now, with that said, here are my 2 favorite from all the years. 1971 football. Now, this is an argument for the 11-man All-State team. I kind of think that even in today's special, it ought to be 11 guys. Look at this. This is a great color picture. They put them on Memorial Stadium's turf. How cool in 1971. And then on the basketball side, there's no question. I know I'm going to hear from a lot of 1991 people, but it's 1982. 1982, this great bunch looking cool at the Jocelyn Art Museum. This is peak sneakers before the sneakerheads, before Air Jordans. You got to see what those guys were wearing. You got to see the different uni styles. They're just chilling. I love All-State pictures in full uniform. That's my number 9. Okay, at number 9 is a football uniform tradition, a football jersey tradition. Probably, I would say that Prep's 3 stripes are the greatest helmet tradition. Minden's font is the greatest number tradition. And Pierce High's Pierce High above the numbers is the greatest uniform jersey tradition. Pierce High has been wearing Pierce High, not Pierce, since 1968, which is basically about the time the team names first start showing up on Nebraska football uniforms. Pierce High. Every single time through the 70s and the great teams they had, into the 80s, now all the way till today, even as they do some BFBS, as uni watchers would call it, black for black's sake, when the blue and white school adds a lot of black to their uniform, they're still wearing Pierce High. When Walt Olson came from Pierce High to Hastings High when I was early in my coaching career, and he led Hastings to 2 state championships, their white jerseys in those 93 and 94 seasons said Hastings High, because he wanted that tradition like Pierce High had up there that he had known. Columbus did it in basketball. Columbus and High under the numbers. And I love basketball uniforms that have words above and below the numbers, so I love those Columbus High jerseys. All right. That was our number 10, Pierce High. For number 11, we're going to one very specific uniform moment in time. Basketball uniforms is 1980. I'm in the 7th grade. And there's absolutely only one uniform that was the absolute coolest. And that was anything that was untucked. Untucked, and especially if they were untucked with the team name down low below the number. That was so cool. We would have loved for that. We had the traditional uniform. We would have loved to have gone untucked. And lots of teams were. Look, this is the Venango Panthers way out west. They're going untucked. Here's the Exeter Eagles going untucked, cutting down the nets. What's cooler than that? Minden honestly, Minden stuck with the Untucked for a long time. The old Minden Whippets, man, they uniform-wise, they were always willing to take chances. And here's the big boys. Here's Westside and Prep. I think this is the Metro Championship game. Both sporting the Untucked look. And of course, how could 1980 end any other way but Untucked versus Untucked? Omaha Westside versus Lincoln East for the Class A title. Didn't matter who won, they both looked great. The Untucked jersey is our number 11. Okay, for number 12, our last one, we're going with uniform snafus. And right in the middle, one snafu. Well, you'll see. All right, so snafus. My first 1976 Seacrest Field. Now, this is the middle of the transition between Nebraska high schools in football wearing white at home and dark at home. And it really took almost a decade. It kind of starts trickling in about 1972, 73, 74. It's building some momentum. And then pretty much dark at home is taking over there. But it really isn't for full until like 80 or 81. It's amazing how long it took. Well, Lincoln Northeast is hosting Grand Island. These are two teams in the same conference. They play a lot. Northeast assumes we're going new school, so they've got their blacks on. Grand Island shows up thinking we're going old school, white at home, so they have their purples on, and we get a game that's white versus purple, and luckily we have a color photograph of it here. All right, the next snafu is 1987. Humphrey, not a snafu, they win a state basketball title. They win it wearing their red uniforms. But two guys' red uniforms have disappeared, were stolen, were vaporized. I don't know. And you can see here in their state championship picture, they're on the Bob Devaney floor celebrating. Look at those two guys wearing red Clearwater uniforms. Yep. They borrowed two uniforms from Clearwater, who was also down at the state tournament, but not wearing their reds that day. And Humphrey High is wearing a combination uniform set. Now, the next one happens in 2000. It's not a snafu at all, and I kind of like it. Humboldt Table Rock Steinauer, HTRS. They are now the Titans, and they wear blue. But they started their history in 1999-2000 as a co-op. Okay, and so they didn't buy new uniforms. They didn't pick a new nickname yet. They played when they were at home. When they were the home team, they wore the white uniforms and were the Cardinals. And the state tournament program even calls them the Cardinals. But when they won their state title on Saturday, they were the road team. They were wearing dark that day. They're wearing black Tigers uniforms. You can see here pictures of, Tigers on the jersey and Cardinals on the warm-up, wearing white at home and black Tigers, white Cardinals at home and black Tigers on the road. I kind of wish more co-ops would do stuff like that, kind of modeled after European soccer, where like your change kit doesn't share any of the colors of your home kit. It's kind of its own different thing. Why couldn't they wear one school's colors as their primary home and another school's colors and keep them both alive that way and just have this like smorgasbord? I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't work. All right. The last one is definitely a snafu because I was involved in it. 1999, I'm on the Hastings coaching staff and we're ready to party like it's 1999 because we went 1-17 in the regular season. Our only win was first weekend of the season, and we lost 16 in a row. And then we went to districts, and by sticking with it, I'm really proud of these kids. They're some of my favorites. Sticking with it and getting a little lucky and getting hot at the right time, they win 3 games to make the state tournament. They had T-shirts that said 4 and who cares, okay? And we went down to play Beatrice, another orange and black team. And Coach Sajovic, who'd been down at state a lot, made a rookie mistake. He was no rookie, but he was thinking that it was like it is now. The high seed wears white. The top seed wears white. It wasn't that case in the old days. It was just kind of by the bracket, and you never really knew. And I've got the team down there, and I'm looking at the bracket, and Coach Sajovic and Coach Johnson aren't with me. I got the team. We're sitting in the stands. We're watching Grand Island Northwest, who's in the opposite spot in the bracket from us, and yet they're wearing black against Schuyler. And I know we have our blacks. And of course, we're playing Beatrice. If Beatrice has their blacks, if they'd have just been orange, we'd have been okay. But the Orangemen wore black. We had our black, so we had to change. So luckily, Coach Sajovic knew the Schuyler coach, had coached with him in the past, got Schuyler's uniforms. Coach Johnson and I end up in the locker room with the Schuyler starters uniforms, which are just soaked sweat. And we're holding them up to the hair dryers, trying to dry them. The rule was if you were a starter for Hastings, you got a bench guy from Schuyler's jersey that was drier. But the guys on the bench, those jerseys, we didn't get them so dry in the hair dryers. So here's what it looked like. Schuyler uniform up top, black Hastings shorts below. The ultimate state tournament snafu. All right, that's it. My 12 biggest, my 12 most memorable, my 12 favorite uniform stories from Nebraska high school sports history. Of course, if you think there's a better one, let me hear about it. This, the series is called Want to Start a Fight. Let me have it. Now, if Paul Lukas, if you're watching, I just want to say thank you for what you did, for creating an amazing place for people who get it, and for making me feel like I was one of those, for finding a place I really felt like I belonged, where I enjoyed so much of the content, where I would share it with my children so much that my grown children will send me pictures and texts now with the message, hey, will UniWatch want to see this? It's been a great way to connect people, and you did that. You made that happen. And so good luck to you. I wish you well. I'll continue to follow your writing because you're one of my favorites. Thank you so much. I'll be watching the site, excited to see what Phil does, but it'll never quite be the same without you, Paul. Thank you.